Go ahead and get started with this session. We're going to be talking about material recovery facilities technology advancements. So thanks for coming in. I appreciate it. We know we're competing with the exhibit hall and some other functions that are happening, so we certainly appreciate the attention. We're going to go for about 90 minutes. We'll see. I know we're kind of standing in between us and the reception, so we'll be mindful of that. But we do have a lot of material that we want to cover. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. My name is Dave Robau. I'm the CEO and Chief Scientist for National Energy USA. I'm accompanied here by Emily DeVore and Mr. John Switzer sitting up here at the front, a couple of more garbage nerds that are joining us here in the conference. I'm going to introduce my panel starting with the far right, Mr. Scott Chase, who is the Business Development Sales Director for AMP Robotics. Thank you for coming. And Mr. Rusty Angel with MachineX, who is the Eastern Region Sales Manager. Did I get that right? Okay, awesome. So I think what I'm going to do is I have some information that I want to share with you, but I also want to keep it entertaining. I know that it's a long day, so I'm trying to kind of maybe mix it up a little bit. So what I thought I would do is I would turn my presentation into a bit of a game show. So I'm going to use one of my favorite game shows, which is Jeopardy, and I'm going to take a lot of the content that I'm going to share with you today, but I'm going to modify it to a presentation called Planet in Jeopardy. So I'm an environmental scientist, like I mentioned, so I come to this from a little bit of a different angle. There's a lot of technology companies, policymakers, elected officials. As an environmental scientist, I look at the impacts of not doing all of the things that we're all here to do. So I look at the focus on landfills and their impacts on the environment and on public health. So with that, let's get started with our game. Our first category is history of garbage. Our next category is what could possibly go wrong, which is kind of what I was thinking when I decided to change my PowerPoint into a game show. So let's see how it goes. The next category is things that start with P. How many Jeopardy fans are there? You guys at least familiar with the show? Okay, at least familiar. I like how the network always follows up Jeopardy with Wheel of Fortune for all those people that feel like dumb. And then you get to Wheel of Fortune, you're like, oh, I got this one. So anyway, so things that start with P, that means the answer is going to start with the letter P. Islands of plastic. Did I just eat that? And then finally, I'm going to wrap it up with the things that the Jetsons promised us, most of which have not come true, by the way. I'm still waiting on the flying car. So we're going to kind of jump right into it. And we're going to start with history of garbage for 200, Alex. Okay, so here we go. Here is our first answer. Humans store the things they no longer want in these mountains. Anybody got an answer? Landfills, $200 for you. By the way, at the end, Gene has your money. So go see Gene. So what are landfills? Correct answer. So my arch enemy in life, and the reason that I got into this industry about 22 years ago, was because I knew we can do better. The idea that we can just stick something in the ground and let our grandkids worry about it, to me, seemed incredibly irresponsible. So I dedicated my life to ending this practice of landfills, which is very, very outdated in my opinion. Landfills are this gift that keep on giving. They pollute the land, air, and water, and we'll talk through some of that in a minute. But since the first recorded landfill in the island of Crete in Greece, 3000 BC, we've been living with this, and we think that this is a way of managing our waste. So as we produce more garbage, all the projections are that more people equals more garbage. The United States is one of the world leaders in producing garbage. Despite having about 5% of the world's population, we produce about 20% of the world's garbage. Let's get back into our game. So, next category, what could possibly go wrong? So for 400, let's look at this one. This greenhouse gas is released from solid waste landfill. So raise your hand if you know it. Just call it out. Methane, good, $600. Go see Gene afterwards. That is correct. What is methane? So this is this issue that we've been having, that we've been dealing with really since the beginning of time, but our garbage has really gotten more and more complicated, right? There's electronic waste, there's biomedical waste, there's things in our waste stream that have pathogens. But one of the things that we're focused on is organics. And some states like California have been leading this market and passing legislation to pull organics out of the waste stream. And why? Because it's just chemistry and physics, folks. That's it. Organic material is going to decompose in a landfill. It's going to produce methane, and it's going to impact our climate. So when we start looking at this correlation between organic matter decomposing in a landfill, as it contributes to global warming and the changing of our atmosphere, this becomes a pretty significant concern for us. So if food waste was a country, it would actually have the third largest footprint of any country, right behind China and the United States. So not only is this a significant problem, but it's a tremendous opportunity as well, because scientists know and engineers know that if we can capture this methane and pull out the things that maybe we don't want, the VOCs and the siloxanes and different things like that, we actually have a great fuel source. So we're interested in looking at this more as a fuel. Okay, so let's get back to our game. So for those of you that are just walking in and you're totally confused because this guy's talking about game shows, we're kind of going through this presentation as it was a game of Jeopardy. So things that start with P. So let's get at it here. By 2021, the world produces 390 million metric tons of this every year. What's that? It's Jeopardy, folks. So I can't accept that as an answer. What is plastics? You are correct, but the judges have ruled. So all your answers need to be in the form of a question, but you are correct. So yes, this is a major issue in what we're dealing with, and this is going to segue ultimately into the presentation, I promise. So plastics are a real issue. For those of you that have been around since the 1950s, back in the 1950s, we were generating globally about 2 million tons of plastic every year. And here we are within your lifetime generating close to 400 million. So plastics are ubiquitous. It's hard to get away from them because they are incredibly convenient, but we have to find ways to take this material out of the waste stream for a couple reasons that I'll talk about. So this is our next clue in the same category, things that start with P. This forever chemical is an emerging challenge for landfill operators. Anybody have any ideas? What is PFAS? That's exactly right. So what is PFAS? PFAS is everywhere in pretty much anything. I bought this non-wrinkle shirt, PFAS. It's in the laundry detergent. It's in, it's in fire retardant, which is where I was exposed to this as an employee of the U.S. Air Force, having to deal with this for some of the training exercises that we were doing. Non-stick pans. I mean, if you can think about it, there's probably PFAS in it. And it's incredibly difficult to deal with it. And not only is it a challenge for the solid waste industry, but it's in our wastewater. I mean, it's in the air that we breathe. This is a real challenge for our industry. So it's up to a lot of the smart people in this room to figure out how we can tackle this challenge. Okay, next category. Islands of plastic. What is this all about? So here's our clue. This garbage patch is twice the size of Texas and is located in this ocean. Any thoughts? What is the Pacific Ocean? That is absolutely correct. You won $800. Go see Mr. Gene Jones at the end of this. He'll pay you out. So this is a real challenge. So what's happening is, at the end of the day, as we know, recycling is a business. So there has to be a buyer at the end of this process. So what's happening is we all feel good because there's a blue container in the back. I'm going to take this little plastic bottle. I'm going to put it in there. But for a long time, that little bottle was making it all the way around the world to countries that you've probably never heard of. And in many instances, if there was no market for it at the end of that process, it was going in the ocean, it was going in the rivers, and it was going into the ocean ultimately. So with the currents, there is this massive, what we call the Great Pacific Garbage Patch of plastics that we had all the right intention and we put it in the blue bin because that's what we were told to do. But little did we know that that was really just the beginning of the journey for that little plastic bottle. And here it ends up in some little village in Sri Lanka, and some 12-year-old sorting through this material, and then ultimately it ends up in the Pacific Ocean. So now we have to deal with this as an unintended consequence. So why is that? I think my personal opinion is you can't outsource recycling to third world countries. Number one, it's irresponsible. Number two, by the time you think about the embedded carbon that it took to get that container halfway around the world, you've really lost all the benefit of recycling at that point. So I firmly believe that all recycling really should be localized and can be. So we talked earlier at lunch today, lots more processing facilities that are opening to take this material domestically, which is really, the responsible way to do it rather than outsourcing that to other countries. So I'll get off my soapbox. Okay, so this is kind of an interesting category. Let's go to, did I just eat that for 800? So here is our clue. Marine debris can break down into very small particles called this. What is microplastics? That is absolutely right. So this is another topic that is being talked about because another major concern for us in this industry are these microplastics, which I'll be honest with you, when I was studying, I guess it was 20 years ago, this wasn't even a topic of discussion. I mean, it might have been for higher ed and maybe some literature, but it really wasn't in the common lexicon. And that's because it's fairly relatively new in that this process that's happening, and we're now starting to study it, we're now starting to understand it a little bit better. And let me see if I can help you kind of visualize this graphically. So again, it's one of these things where the material, it's in our laundry detergents, it's in a lot of the different things that we use every day. It ends up going into the aquatic environment. It bioaccumulates in the tissue of marine species, and then it goes up the food chain. So you can see, they got a little top of that graph kind of cut off. I don't know if that's metaphorically saying we're chopping our own heads off or not, but anyway, so these microplastics are working their way up the food chain and creating lots of issues from a human health perspective. There's a statistic out there, and I hate to even recant this statistic because I'm not even sure if it's true, but I've heard it several times where we eat about a credit card worth of plastic. I mean, that's just like amazing to think about, but these microplastics are making their way into the food chain. So what's happening is, if you remember that graphic that I showed you earlier with the garbage patch out in the Pacific Ocean, these plastics are breaking down just through regular processes with ultraviolet light, and it's creating these microplastics, and they don't dissolve in the water column. So what happens is a lot of the marine mammals are uptaking this material, and it's creating issues for us in the food chain. So not only is it creating an issue in the environment, but these are things that we're ingesting in many instances. All right, so the Daily Double. This is the part where everybody's supposed to clap. You guys don't watch this show? It's the Daily Double. Come on. You got all these brainiacs on here, probably got shoved in lockers in high school. You got to clap when you see the Daily Double. Okay, so for $1,000, you know what? We're going to go risk it all. We're going to risk it all. We're going to risk it all on this last category, on things that the Jetsons promised us. So here's our last clue. This AI-powered cleaning robot appeared in the first episode of the Jetsons. Say it again? All right, I'll take it. Who is Rosie the robot? So if you remember, any Jetsons fans? Any? Okay, so all this technology is coming because George Jetson was born in 2022 on the show. So all this technology is coming. But this technology in particular, where we have AI-powered robots that are cleaning up our mess, is really the perfect segue into our conversation. See what I did there? See what I did? Okay. Whatever happened to the segue, by the way? I thought that was really cool technology. Anyway, so this whole topic of AI-powered robots is really what's bringing us to our subject matter experts here, which I'll turn it over in just a minute. But just think about, for those of us that have been in this industry for a long time, like over a decade, robots weren't talked about, a decade ago. This is kind of a new phenomenon, and I'm very curious to hear from our panel of experts as to the emergence of these robots, to try and figure out, is it the high cost of labor, for instance? Is it that, with policies like National Sword, we have to do a better job of cleaning up our recyclables? So I'm hoping that over the next, 45, 50 minutes or so, we'll get into a conversation. But the goal here, and the reason that I turned this into kind of an interactive introduction, was really I'm hoping to get a bit more, dialogue going with the audience, where it's not just somebody up here talking to you while your heads are buried in your phones. I see you back there. So this is really just designed to be more interactive. I don't mean to pick on anybody in particular. But the goal here, the reason we come to these shows and we take time away from our families and away from the office